New on midday, a Louisville man appeared in court this morning for an attempted murder charge after what police describe as a racially motivated attack on another man who didn't speak English. Wave News reporter Kirsten Foote joining us now with the details. Kirsten.
Jeremiah Page is charged with attempted murder and first-degree assault, both felonies after allegedly attacking a man on Preston Highway with a cleaver. This happened yesterday. According to an arrest report, Page told officers he attacked the man because he was, quote, trespassing on his land and that he owned all of Louisville. The report goes on to say Page told police he attacked the man because he was, quote, a foreigner. Page reportedly hit the man with the cleaver twice in the head and once in the shoulder before running off. The man who was attacked was treated immediately by vet technicians at a nearby animal hospital who witnessed the attack. He was then taken to Louisville Hospital where he's being treated for serious injuries. During Page's court appearance today, the judge entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. She then set his bond.
Obviously, the court is concerned reading these allegations, not only the allegations behind them, but the motive that's written. As part of the citation, obviously the court has concerns about the safety of the community. The bond's going to be set at $750,000.
Page would get home incarceration if he posts that bond. He's also not allowed to have any knives or contact with the victim. He'll be back in court on April 17th. Kirsten Foote, Wave News.